Hi, I'm Stacey Johnson, and you're listening to the Caretakers Journey Podcast.
Welcome back. I am your host, Carole Leathem, and today we are in episode 2 of our four-part series, Becoming Whole Again. My conversation with Stacey continues this week with the topic, Mourning Who You Were. And I love this topic. We're going to dive into the rarely talked about grief of losing who you used to be. And I know for me, as I've been walking through and navigating the loss of my mom, it has been very interesting for me to try to figure out who I am without being able to pick up the phone and call my mom. And after having talked to her almost multiple times a day for 3.5 years, what does that look like in my life? And maybe you're not mourning maybe you're no longer the carefree version of yourself that you once were. And I know sometimes I find myself going, where'd that person go? Maybe caretaking, trauma, or simply just passing of time has changed you. Mourning is a part of the healing process, something I never really thought about before. And this episode is an invitation to let go with grace and to make room for who you are becoming. We're going to explore how to honor your past self while embracing your new self. It's a good one. And there's a God-led identity that we are shaped by with resilience, growth, and grace. Guys, this is sacred ground. Let's walk it together. And my guest for this series is Stacey Johnson. You heard last week, I read this whole big bio on her, but what I want you to know is that she is a woman's empowerment coach. She's a resilience mentor and the founder of Anchor Resilience. We heard last week about she had 2 major life shifts in the course of a few weeks, and that led her to just transform her grief into a powerful mission. And we're blessed during this series to be the recipients of that mission. Her mission is to help overwhelmed, selfless women who are over-functioning regulate their nervous systems and rebuild our lives rooted in clarity, strength, and trust. And when Stacey's not coaching, you're going to find her outside in nature with her family and her dogs or on her YouTube channel. And her message is so clear. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. Stacey, welcome back to episode 2.
Thank you, Carol. I am so happy to be on the Caretaker Journey Podcast. It's wonderful.
Last week I thought I just thought and thought and thought about what some of the things were that you said. And I just kept going back. I still go back to the put your hand on your chest and the stomach and then just the connection that you feel immediately. And
Right.
caretakers are often the glue that holds everyone together. And I found that in my life with my family because when my mom passed away, everything imploded when I kind of backed away and wasn't trying to control everything anymore. And I think people look at us as the dependable ones, the strong ones, the fixer ones. And if people don't look at us like that, we do. We think
Mhm.
that's who we are. But what happens when that identity no longer fits? When we find ourselves exhausted, unseen, longing to be different? Why is it so hard for caretakers to let go of the identity of being the strong one? Because we don't always have to be the strong one.
Correct. Yes. I mean, for many caretakers, being that strong one is the role that we've identified with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's formed our safety. Again, it goes back to that nervous system regulation that we talked about in episode 1 is that, that has been our identity. And so that feels safe for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do become the glue, the fixer, the dependable one, because somewhere along the line, we have learned that that is that those phrases kind of get ingrained in us.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that's who we kind of identified with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so change is hard and
Mm.
it's risky to kind of strip ourselves away from that role.
Yeah.
And there's fear underneath it too. Like, so if
Well,
I stop being the strong one, will everything fall apart?
yeah.
Will anybody else show up for me?
Oh,
you know, and
I laugh I'm laughing because I have felt all of those things. It's like you're, like, describing my life over the last few months. It's like, "But if I don't do it, who's gonna do it?" You know? And yet, if we don't let go of it, then we don't give anybody else the opportunity to do
right,
it.
right, exactly.
So
Yes.
so when you talk about mourning that version of yourself that's no longer sustainable, which when I think about the idea of what I was doing, I don't even know now. Like, I look at who that person was for 3.5 years, I don't even recognize them. I don't even know how I did it. I made like 17 trips to Milwaukee in 3 years. And many of them were for, like, 3 or 4 weeks at a time.
Mhm.
And I, like, look back and I go, "Wow, wow, wow." And even now, there's things that I encounter that are not sustainable. So what does it look like to mourn that version of yourself that is no longer sustainable? Because that's the only way we're gonna start the healing process, like we talked about last week.
Right, right. Well, it's we have to recognize that also that version of ourselves, we also may have to mourn that loss too,
So good. Mhm.
because yes, you are still your mom's daughter, but that role is different now. And
Yeah.
so we do have to mourn. So I always talk about that there are invisible losses that we have to mourn as well.
Mhm. So
And
good.
that version of ourselves we have to mourn and be open to looking at what is the version that we do have currently and then what we also do want. Because I'm guessing, along with all the other women that I've worked with, is that we lost this vision of who we dreamt we would be, you
Mm.
know, our little girl self of like the vision of, fairy tales and dream, all those big dreams that we may have that may have disappeared as we've taken care of other people.
Mhm.
And so recognizing like what do I want now?
Yeah.
Like what is that version of us now? So again, it's in doing that, mourning of that version that we had
Yeah.
too is part of the work.
Yeah. And I realized that it took about I've been on this journey for 10 years with my husband, and when my husband crashed, it really was a fat I look back now, and it doesn't look like it was as fast as it was, but when it happened, it felt like it was like one day my life was this, the next day my life was this,
Right.
and it's like all of a sudden everything changed. I lost my identity as a wife, as a pastor's wife, all of these things in my life. I lost my business. All of these things changed. I lost my independence because now I live with my daughter, and and so when I look back now, I could see the signs, but at that moment, it felt like it was like this like overnight earthquake. I often describe it as an earthquake that just changed the landscape of my life.
Sure.
And and we last week we talked about, we forget to dream. We forget to say, what do I want? And I think it's so important when we talk about grief, that grief opens it back up so that we have the ability to connect again with that person. And maybe our dreams are going to look different
Mhm.
this time
Right.
around. But how can someone begin to differentiate between who they are and who we've or people have conditioned us to be? And I say people, but really we condition ourselves. We are other people really don't condition us, but we've been conditioned or we condition ourselves. So what does it look like to begin to tell the difference?
Yeah. It starts with pausing, really pausing long enough to hear your own voice between
Mm.
all that noise. Like you said, we have conditioned ourselves because those messages of like if I don't do it, who's going to
Mhm.
do it? Or if I don't do it, will I look like I'm failing? Those become ingrained messages in our head.
So good. Oh my god.
So those are those noise that's all the noise that we have to learn how to pause so that we can
Mhm.
hear our own voice and get
Mm.
connected to our intuition and stop, you know, listening to all of those voices, you know. We also, there's so many messages that we can get, like rest is, if I rest, then it means I might be lazy or I'm not doing enough,
Yeah.
and so it's beginning to untangle who we truly are from who we've been conditioned by with all those that outside noise.
Mhm.
So I help women, you know, learn to change some of these things. So we have to notice the shoulds, you know,
Mm.
like who told us this, like again, like when you said I pause and I ask myself, is there truth to this?
Yeah.
That's part of this too, is learning to recognize, is there truth to the statements that I'm hearing?
It's so true, and I think for me, it would be really easy, and in the beginning, I remember blaming all of the negativity, all of the changes on my husband's well, my husband's had this mental crash, and so therefore, this is why this is happening to me, and it was easy for me to blame that, and yet then I fell into this trap of, like we talked about last week, the thoughts start coming in, and if we don't stop some of those thoughts or change those thoughts, then we do sink deeper and deeper and deeper. And when I talk about we condition ourselves, I really do think that's how we do it. Our thoughts
Oh,
come in, and then
yep.
all of a sudden we start to believe that. And maybe there might be, in my case, my husband's mental health was some anger and blame that was directed at me. So not only am I struggling with the thoughts I have, but I'm struggling with some stuff that's coming at me. And I know I have a friend right now whose husband is struggling with dementia, and he has the angry kind of dementia.
Mhm.
And so every day she's having to fight that negativity that's coming at her.
Right.
And really there's this whole thought process that's going on, but there's a guilt
Mhm.
too. And so, what role does guilt play in holding onto outdated roles or beliefs? Because I, I need help with this one.
Yeah. I mean, we talked a little bit about guilt in our first episode, but guilt is that emotional glue that keeps
Oh.
us stuck.
Mm,
It and it keeps us stuck in those identities that no
mhm.
longer serve us.
Yes.
Especially when we're a caretaker, it's those thoughts that like I'm not, and guilt is like a sometimes can be that protector,
Mm,
and it whispers in our head those other thoughts of like you're being selfish, you're
mm.
letting people down, so guilt can be that kind of like that glue that keeps us stuck
Oh,
inside that,
yeah. I
and
had a
so
I had a friend as an example of that. I had a friend whose husband was in the latter stages of Alzheimer's. And I kept trying to get her to go out to breakfast. I kept trying to get her to get out of the house, and she wouldn't do it. And here's the sad thing. She had great insurance. She had someone that was paid to be there for 8 hours a day. And so she could have, but there was a guilt inside of her that if she left and something happened,
right.
or that person, what if that person didn't know, what her husband wanted for it was, and we do that to ourselves. And we talked about this a little bit last week when we say, I'm the only person. And that guilt makes us believe that we might be the superhero that only can care for our loved one. And it's not true, because then we fall into that trap of not taking care of ourselves, and we create this whole unsustainable life. And I think that's kind of what you were alluding to.
Yeah, because guilt keeps us in that state of over functioning and over giving and overstretching. Not because it's, what we've been told to do, but it's that guilt that gets us going in there and
Yeah.
convinces us it's the only way that it can be done. And
Mhm.
so again, in my work, I we start to recognize that feeling
Mm,
of guilt and start to really connect what are the thoughts that are keeping that guilt around and what's the
mhm,
story behind the guilt.
mm,
Because guilt isn't always like that a specific moral compass. It's
right.
often trauma or fear based. It's a learned response from old
Mhm.
roles and old stories that we that are kind of stuck inside us.
Oh, that's so, so good. I just finished, earlier in 2025, I finished some work with a trauma therapist. And I went to her because all of a sudden it became apparent that there were some things I from even from childhood that I had
Mhm.
never dealt with that were getting piled on top of things, and I'm responding here because of this. And I realized that there's some preconditioning that had been happened, and I call it dragging the suitcases or the trunks of all
Right.
of our experiences into the present,
Right.
and we open them up and we start putting them on, even though they no longer fit, even though they no longer work, but we start applying them to the circumstance that we're in. And in some ways, I found myself shaping things when I would be dealing with my husband, especially in the early days when he would get angry and blameful. I would find myself pulling back to experiences with my narcissistic mom and my abusive alcoholic father and playing that out. And now I'm making it worse instead of making it better. And so the trauma therapist helped me unpack all of that.
Uh-huh.
And I wish I had known you because I could have probably come to Stacy at that time, and Stacy probably could have helped me too. So I really encourage the listeners right here just to, if you are struggling and you're feeling what we're talking about in that deepness and that hurt, reach out to Stacy. If you're in the Ohio area, I'm sure she probably does stuff on Zoom
I do
as well.
online. Yep,
But
I can meet anybody, like you said, you're in 33 different
countries,
countries.
mhm,
I am doing work on Zoom, so I can meet with
yeah.
anybody.
Yeah. So let's talk. We talked a little bit about the nervous system last week,
Mhm.
and I want to kind of pull that back in to this topic as well, because how does the nervous system um like help someone feel safe? What are some things about our nervous system that help us feel safe? Like, let's say safe enough to even shift identities, because I know I can get locked into this. I found myself responding like the scared little 9-year-old in the situation with my husband because the tones were the same, the
Mhm.
terms were the same, the feelings and the fear were all the same, and my nervous system took over and
Right.
almost recreated these experiences from then. So how does our nervous system, or what tools can we use to stop that in our tracks?
Yeah, our nervous system is, connected, you know, it's all connected, so
Yeah.
again, our thoughts trigger our emotions and our emotions can trigger that response and that response is coming from our nervous system. And so
Mhm.
the you know our nervous system is wired for survival.
Yes.
That's what it's there for. I
Mhm.
mean, if we were being, if I opened up my back door to let my dogs out, I want my nervous system to put me in that fight or flight mode because I
Yeah.
want to get out of there.
Mhm.
And so it is a tool or a system that has been there for survival. Um, but to step into our new versions of ourselves, our body needs to feel safe.
Mm,
And it at times it can feel unsafe to let go of our old
mm,
versions because again, the new versions can um they're not comfortable yet. So
mm.
our nervous system sees us as a threat.
Yeah.
So, using practices like grounding
Mm,
and breath work, gentle movement, I will sometimes tell my clients, turn on the music and
mm,
dance in your living room or
mhm,
dance while you cook. Using my rooting ritual that I talked about in the first episode helps signal to our body that we're safe now. Like
mhm,
just this, putting
mhm,
our hand on our heart and our belly, that signals to our brain that right in this moment we are safe because we
Yeah.
are supporting ourselves,
Mm. So
and
good.
so that helps us feel safe instead of being in that hyper vigilant state.
Yeah.
And when our nervous system feels regulated and it's not in that fight or flight or freeze or fawn kind of way, then we can start to explore the new behaviors or
Mhm.
identities without the old ones kind of like hijacking our, with that guilt or fear.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not about forcing the change, but it's about, creating that safe space for
Yeah.
your mind and body to receive that new identity.
Yeah. I know I have another friend who's trying to find themselves after some serious caretaking, and their caretaking identity is gone. I still have half of mine, but hers is totally gone. Do you have a story you could share with us about someone who was able to reclaim themselves after releasing that caretaking identity? Because there is such a pressure, and when that
Yes.
pressure comes off, it's like, "Who the heck am I now?"
Yes, yes. I have a client that came to me in my coaching business. I'll refer to her as Rachel for protection of her
Okay,
identity.
yeah, absolutely.
But she was a high performing nurse, so her career was already a caretaking role.
Mhm.
She was a mom, and her extended family expected her to do some caretaking. And then her mom became ill and she
Mm.
needed to step into that role as well. So she was, basically a caretaker everywhere. And she came to me saying, I just feel like I'm disappearing. Like I
Mhm.
don't know who I am anymore. Everybody needs something from me. And I'm just have that overwhelming feeling, you know. And then, yeah, her mom passed away and she did feel like that was stripped away from her. And so we worked through, again, mourning, not just the physical,
Yeah.
not the funeral type of grief. She had to mourn that too, but she did also have to mourn the identity of that caretaking role. But then, so using the somatic techniques, using my rooting rituals, changing those thoughts of like, you know, that I'm I'm only cared like I'm if I don't do it, who
Yeah.
else is,
Yeah.
I'm failing,
Yeah.
letting go of that guilt. When she started to explore some of the thoughts and then change the messages that she was feeling, that's when she was really stepped into that healing process,
Mm,
you know.
that's
But
so good.
again, like, probably what your friend does need, like, they need to mourn that identity,
Mhm.
those and that's what we don't talk about those invisible losses, I mean,
Yeah.
if we think about it, when we get bereavement leave, you get so many days to, do the first process, and people are always talking about the funeral type of losses, but we don't talk about the losses of our identity.
Mm,
And we and so and again, our
so
nervous
good.
system does stay in that heightened state when we're caregivers, especially if we have so many roles that we've been playing, and
Mhm.
we have to get it to that safe space to be able to accept that new identity. But
Um,
one of my clients, when she started doing all of that, she um started recognizing that all the other of caretaking, she did it for herself,
mm,
not because she was being asked to do it.
yeah. Yeah. There's so many different roles as I've been working with caretakers for the last few years. And even with my own journey, there's so many different roles that we place ourselves in.
Mhm.
And sometimes we have to learn I mean, we could do a whole nother show on boundaries. How do we set
Yes,
boundaries? Because
right.
because it's really hard when you get caught up in that identity. And what I'm discovering, because just in some way I'm going through this with losing my mom, there's there's an identity that I've lost in being a daughter and being a caretaker
Right.
for my mom and being a sibling, because some things happen with my family, and some of my siblings, we don't have as close of a relationship as we did before. And when you go through all of that, you talk about the mourning, and we know there's a grief that we can attach to the death of my mom, but there's
Right.
a grief over here that you call this I think you called them the silent
Yeah,
grief,
the silent griefs or the
or
invisible.
the invisible ones,
Yeah.
and that is something that I've just now started exploring, because I never realized that grief, like, took on that. Like, the first time I logged into the Walmart app, there was this tremendous emotion that hit me, and I'm like,
Oh,
"Why am I acting like this? Why am I feeling like this?" And then all of a sudden I looked at it and I was like, because I had sent every week for 3 years a
r
Walmart order to my mom.
right.
And all of a sudden, I'm doing it for myself, but yeah, and
Yeah.
even now as I'm talking to you about it, I can feel that kind of starting to bubble up. And so good, so good. So as we're closing out this episode, I'm so excited. We have 2 more episodes coming. But as we're closing out this episode today, what is one last thing you'd like to leave? I didn't give you this question in advance, so I'm gonna ask you to just do it off the top of your head, but what is one last thing that you'd like to leave our listeners with on this topic?
Yeah, it's so giving yourself permission to mourn the the identity that
Mhm,
you've been identifying with for
mhm.
so many years and giving yourself permission to be you,
Yeah.
like finding you again.
Wow, so good. I will put last week I asked you how the listeners could connect with you. Do you wanna share that again if somebody's just kinda diving into episode 2 with us, how they can connect with you?
Yes, I'm on social media. My YouTube channel is Surviving Disruption. Um, TikTok and Instagram is Stacey
Mhm,
Johnson Coaching. Facebook, I my profile is Stacey V Johnson.
mhm.
And email is probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. It's more direct, and that would be Stacy at StaceyJohnsonCoaching.com.
And I will put all of that into the show notes so you can just click and reach out or click and go to any one of those links. Stacey, thank you so much for joining me again this week. We're going to be back next week for a third meaningful conversation. And this one, I'm really excited. I keep saying that because they're building and building. But next week, Stacey and I are going to be talking about when overwhelm isn't really overwhelm and what's really going on under the surface. Because as caretakers, we always say, "I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so overwhelmed." I cannot tell you
Mhm.
how many times I've heard people say that. But there's actually something else going on under the surface, and we're gonna unpack that next week. So as we close out our show, thank you, Stacey, for joining me.
Thank you.
I'm so excited you're coming back next week. And I'm just so thankful for each of you who join me every single week. I know that the caretaker's journey can be messy, it can be chaotic, it can be overwhelming. And maybe that's not really what's going on, and we'll find out next week. There you go. The Caretaker's Journey, this ministry, podcast, website, newsletter, all of it exists to remind us that we are part of over 80 million caretakers around the world. Think about that for a second. Get
80 million.
chills when I think about it. There's
Mhm.
over 55 million of them in the United States alone. Our community is now in 33 countries. We are not alone on this journey. Hear me say that. If you know a caretaker, please share the show with them. If you haven't subscribed yet, if you would, please do that, because that helps other caretakers find our community. I put a link in the show notes for you to sign up for the weekly Caretakers Journey newsletter that drops into your inbox every Tuesday morning. It's full of inspiration, practical tips, things that I'm finding helpful on my journey, and also a link to the podcast so you can just click in the newsletter and listen to whatever's going live that week. Next week, I'll be back for another meaningful conversation with Stacey Johnson about what it looks like to be on the caretaker's journey. And until then, it's all about him.